The Apache opened the sack, and time itself seemed to stop cold. "Just kill me fast," she said. The morning began like any other in the dusty, sun-scorched region where she had been sent. The air was dry, and the wind carried the faint smell of earth and smoke from distant fires. She had been part of humanitarian missions before, but this one felt different. Perhaps it was the strange quiet over the land, or the uneasy look on the faces of the convoy soldiers. She couldn't be sure. She had learned to trust her instincts, and today, something deep inside her told her that this day would not be ordinary. She sat in the back of the military truck, clutching a small photograph of her family. It was a worn picture, the edges frayed, but it was her anchor to the life she had temporarily left behind. She looked at it often, especially in moments when fear or doubt crept in. Her family's smiling faces reminded her why she had chosen this path. She had always wanted to help people, even if it meant putting herself in danger. Today, however, the usual sense of purpose was tangled with a knot of unease. The convoy moved slowly along the dusty road, the wheels of the trucks kicking up small clouds of dust that settled over everything in a fine gray layer. Around her, the soldiers were alert but calm, speaking in low tones and checking their radios. From above, the Apache helicopter hovered, its rotors thundering, scanning the surrounding terrain for any sign of danger. Its presence was reassuring, yet somehow its shadows felt heavy, pressing down on the convoy as if warning them that something unusual was about to happen. She noticed the way the wind moved differently through the clearing ahead. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but the trees and shrubs seemed to shiver under its influence. She didn't know why, but she had learned over time that nature often gives warnings before humans even realize there is a threat. She tried to shake off the feeling, focusing instead on the routine. Her thoughts drifted to the people who'd be waiting for the supplies they were bringing. Children in small villages, elderly men and women who had no one else to count on. Their faces flashed in her mind, reminding her that fear could not stop her from doing her job. The convoy approached a bend in the road, and the tension in the air seemed to increase. The soldiers signaled to slow down, their gestures sharp and precise. Her heart began to beat faster, a quiet rhythm that matched the distant thumping of the helicopter above. She looked out over the edge of the truck, trying to see what had drawn their attention. At first, she saw nothing unusual. The road ahead looked empty, the landscape stretching out in muted browns and greens. Yet, there was something there, something small and out of place that made the soldiers tighten their formation and become suddenly silent. As they drew closer, she could see it more clearly. In the middle of the dusty road lay a large sack, oddly shaped and tied with thick ropes. It was dirty and worn, almost blending into the earth, yet it seemed wrong, as if it did not belong there. The soldiers halted the convoy immediately, creating a small perimeter around it. They gestured for everyone to stay back, their faces serious, eyes scanning the surrounding area for any possible threat. The woman's stomach twisted, and she gripped the edges of her seat as if holding herself together would give her some sense of control. The Apache above hovered in place, circling slowly. Its rotors kicked up additional dust, making small clouds that swirled around the trucks, and the sound was both protective and menacing. She felt as if the helicopter itself sensed the strangeness of the situation, as if it were aware of something the human eye could not yet see. She had never felt anything like this before. The stillness of the convoy, the tension in the soldiers' bodies, and the unnatural presence of the sack created a feeling that time itself had slowed. She thought about the possibilities. Perhaps it was just abandoned supplies left by someone in a hurry. Perhaps it was a stray animal seeking shelter. Yet deep down she knew it was something else. Her instincts had never been wrong before. There was a heaviness in the air that could not be explained, a silent warning that demanded caution. She wanted to look away, to pretend it was nothing, but she couldn't. Something in her told her she had to see it, had to witness whatever lay inside, no matter how frightening it might be. The soldiers approached cautiously, their movements deliberate and measured. Each step they took toward the sack seemed to stretch the moment, as if the world had slowed down just for them. She could hear the soft rustling of the rope as they checked it, the faint clinking of metal as one soldier adjusted his gloves. Every sound seemed amplified, echoing in her mind in a way that made her pulse quicken. She tried to steady her breathing, but it came in shallow, rapid bursts. The photograph of her family in her hands felt heavier than usual, as if it were a shield against the unknown. The wind shifted again, and the trees around the clearing whispered in the breeze. It was the kind of sound that might go unnoticed if one were not paying attention, but she heard it clearly. It was almost like a warning. A subtle voice carried on the air, telling her that the moment they were approaching would change everything. She thought about the children she had seen in villages, their eyes wide with hope and trust. She remembered the elderly couple who had thanked her with a simple smile, their gratitude heavy with the understanding that help was rare. The thought of them strengthened her resolve. Fear could not stop her. Then, suddenly, the sack moved. Just a little, at first, but enough to make her jump in her seat. The soldiers froze in place, their training taking over as they assessed the situation. The Apache above hovered in closer, its sensors scanning, and the thrum of its rotors seemed louder, more insistent. She felt a chill run down her spine, a combination of fear and anticipation that left her almost unable to breathe. She wanted to look away, to close her eyes and pretend it was nothing, but she couldn't. She had to see, had to be present, because somehow, she knew, whatever was inside that sack mattered more than anything she had ever faced. The lead soldier signaled for one of the others to cut the ropes. The knife flashed briefly in the sunlight as it sliced through the thick cords, and the sack began to open slowly. Her heart pounded in her chest like a drum, and every muscle in her body tensed. She could feel the collective breath of the convoy held in suspense, a shared anticipation that bound them all together in that single frozen moment. The world seemed to pause, the dust suspended in the air, the helicopter hovering silently above, as if waiting for what would come next. She gripped the photograph of her family tighter, feeling a strange mix of dread and responsibility. Whatever lay inside that sack would change the day, maybe even change her forever. She had always known that her work carried risks, but this was something beyond the ordinary dangers of travel or conflict. This was a moment that demanded attention, courage, and compassion in equal measure. She could feel the weight of it pressing down on her, and she knew that she could not turn away, no matter how terrifying it might be. As the soldiers slowly pulled the sack open, she caught a glimpse of what lay inside, and time itself seemed to hesitate. The shape inside was curled up, small and fragile, yet alive. There was a sense of vulnerability, a quiet plea that reached her even before words were spoken. She felt a wave of emotion rise in her chest, a mixture of fear, sorrow, and an instinctive desire to protect. She knew in that instant that nothing would ever be the same again. The Apache continued to hover above, its sensors trained on the clearing as if to witness what humans on the ground were only beginning to understand. The convoy remained still, the soldiers cautious but prepared for anything. And she, sitting in the back of the truck, realized that this ordinary morning had become a moment suspended in time. It was no longer a simple humanitarian mission. It was a turning point, a moment when the ordinary world had cracked just enough to reveal something extraordinary, something that demanded courage, attention, and compassion from everyone present. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew that she would remember this moment for the rest of her life. The photograph of her family, the dusty road, the hovering helicopter, the tense soldiers, and the strange, ominous sack would stay with her forever. It was the beginning of a story she had not expected to be part of, a story that would test everything she thought she knew about fear, courage, and human resilience. And in that moment she silently promised herself that she would not look away. Whatever was inside that sack deserved to be seen, understood, and helped, even if it meant facing the unknown in its most raw and powerful form. The convoy had stopped suddenly, and the air felt thick with tension. Dust hung in the sunlight, swirling lazily as the wind picked up, but it could not shake the unease that had settled over everyone. The large sack lying on the dusty road was no longer just an object. It had become the center of attention, a mystery demanding immediate understanding. The woman in the back of the truck held her breath. She could feel her pulse racing, her body taut with anticipation. Every instinct told her that what was inside the sack would change everything. The soldiers moved cautiously, their boots crunching softly on the dry dirt. Their eyes scanned the surrounding trees, the hills beyond, and the open sky above. The Apache helicopter circled slowly, its shadow passing over the convoy like a watchful guardian. Its rotors beat the air with a steady rhythm, a reminder of both protection and the seriousness of the moment. The woman tried to steady her own breathing, but it was impossible. Every sound, every movement felt sharper than usual, as if the world had slowed down just for them. The first soldier stepped closer to the sack, his hands steady but tense. He signaled for the others to spread out, forming a careful perimeter around it. The woman's heart pounded in her chest. She tried to imagine what could be inside. Could it be supplies left behind in haste? Perhaps someone had abandoned something valuable or fragile. Yet her instincts told her it was something more, something living, something fragile, something that needed help immediately. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it a strange, subtle warning. She felt it brush across her face, cold and insistent. It was one of those moments when nature seemed to communicate in ways humans often ignored. She could feel her stomach twist with a mixture of fear and anticipation. She wanted to look away, to pretend it was not happening, but something deeper inside refused. She had seen suffering before, but this felt different. This was a moment that demanded courage, attention, and compassion. The soldiers began to examine the sack more closely. Its surface was rough and dirty, blending with the earth in color but unnatural in its shape. The ropes binding it were thick and tied tightly, suggesting care in its sealing. Every movement the soldiers made was slow and deliberate, as if they feared provoking whatever might lie inside. The woman's mind raced. She remembered the stories she had heard from other missions, the warnings about situations that seemed harmless at first but turned out to be far more complicated. Her instincts screamed that this was one of those moments. As they carefully untied the first knots, a small sound emerged from the sack. It was faint, almost imperceptible, like a soft rustling, but it made her flinch. She could feel the collective tension of the convoy tighten. The soldier paused, signaling for silence. Even the helicopter above seemed to hover more cautiously, as if it sensed the same tension that gripped them all. The woman could feel the hairs on her arms standing on end. The rustling sound continued, growing slightly louder, and the anticipation became almost unbearable. The first flap of the sack began to fall open. The soldiers leaned in cautiously, their eyes narrowing, their hands ready for anything. She could feel her chest tighten as she watched. She knew that whatever was inside could not defend itself, but the fear and uncertainty in the air made every heartbeat feel heavier. She gripped the photograph of her family tightly, as if holding it would give her courage. The small image of smiling faces reminded her why she was here. To help, to protect, and to witness when others could not. The rustling inside the sack grew into a small, frightened movement. She could make out a vague shape, curled up and shivering. The soldiers froze. Even in her own body, she felt a moment of suspended time. Her mind raced, imagining all the possibilities. Was it a child? An animal? She could not tell, but the sense of urgency and vulnerability was unmistakable. She realized in that instant that this moment would not be forgotten. It was a moment when everything seemed to pause, when the ordinary world faded, leaving only the raw immediacy of life and its fragility. The lead soldier motioned for the others to stay back while he opened the sack a little more. The shape inside became clearer. It was small, human, fragile, and trembling. Her heart sank, and she could feel tears prickling in her eyes. The soldiers exchanged glances, a silent acknowledgement that the situation was far more serious than they had expected. She could see the tension in their faces, the careful way they adjusted their gloves, and the way they shifted slightly to protect the small figure from harm. The woman's mind flashed back to the villages she had visited, to the children whose eyes held both curiosity and fear. She remembered the elderly, grateful for even the smallest help, and she understood in that instant that this moment was about more than fear or danger. It was about humanity, about compassion, and about standing witness when someone could not speak for themselves. The small figure in the sack was vulnerable, but it was alive, and that alone demanded courage from everyone present. As the soldiers slowly lifted the sack open, the woman could see the face of the small child inside. Wide eyes stared back at her, filled with fear and confusion. Her lips trembled, and she seemed too weak to speak. The woman's chest tightened. She wanted to reach out, to offer comfort, but she knew she had to wait until the soldiers ensured it was safe. Every second felt drawn out, every movement deliberate, as if the world itself were holding its breath. The helicopter above hovered closer, scanning the surrounding area for any potential threats. Its presence was a quiet reassurance, but it could not erase the intensity of the moment. The woman could feel the adrenaline surging through her, mingled with a deep instinctive desire to protect. She realized that this child's life at this moment was fragile in a way that words could not describe. The child was trembling, curled up in a protective ball, and yet there was something in her eyes, a tiny spark of hope, a faint acknowledgement that someone had come to help. The lead soldier finally spoke in a quiet voice, instructing everyone to move back slightly, giving the child space. She could see the relief in the child's eyes, though mingled with confusion and fear. The woman felt an overwhelming wave of emotion. She had expected danger, yes, but she had not expected such raw vulnerability. She realized that this moment, this encounter, would be etched in her memory forever. It was a reminder that life could be both fragile and resilient at the same time. She knelt slightly in the back of the truck, wishing she could offer comfort immediately. But she knew the soldiers were handling it with care. The child's trembling slowed a little as she adjusted the sack to make her more comfortable. The woman could see the small rise and fall of her chest, the way she clutched her own arms as if to protect herself from a world that had been cruel. She understood, in a deep and unspoken way, that the child's fear was not just about the moment. It was about everything that had led to it. The wind shifted again, rustling the nearby trees and carrying the faint scent of dust and earth. She felt it brush against her face like a soft warning, a reminder that even in moments of rescue the world could be unpredictable. She held the photograph of her family tighter, feeling a connection between the safety and warmth she had known at home and the fragility and uncertainty faced by the child before her. It was a small, human bridge across two very different worlds. The soldiers finished opening the sack and carefully helped the child out. She was small, weak, and trembling, but she was alive. The woman's heart soared with a quiet relief, mingled with a deep sorrow for the fear and suffering the child had endured. She realized that this was more than a rescue. It was a reminder of why she had come here, why she had chosen this path, and why courage and compassion were more important than anything else. As the child was placed safely on a blanket, the woman reached forward instinctively, offering a hand. The child's eyes met hers, and in that moment, there was a silent understanding. No words were needed. The world had been frightening, yes, but now there was a chance, a spark of hope. The helicopter above continued to circle, its rotors beating steadily, a symbol of vigilance and protection. The convoy stood quietly, each person aware that this moment, delicate, fragile, and extraordinary, would be remembered forever. The woman took a deep breath, realizing that what had begun as an ordinary mission had become something far more meaningful. It was a moment that demanded presence, courage, and empathy. It was a moment that reminded her that even in the harshest, most uncertain conditions, humanity could prevail, and she knew that this was only the beginning of a story that would challenge, inspire, and transform everyone who had been there. The child sat trembling on the blanket, her small frame curled up as if trying to make herself invisible. Every muscle in her body seemed to hold fear, as though she expected the world to strike again at any moment. The woman crouched a little closer, her own heart pounding with a mixture of relief, sorrow, and determination. She could feel the tension in the air, thick and heavy, pressing down on the convoy, the helicopter, and even the surrounding trees. It was as if the world itself was waiting for what would happen next. The soldiers stayed alert, scanning the surrounding hills and tree line for any potential threat. Their eyes were trained, focused, but even the most seasoned among them seemed unsettled by the raw vulnerability before them. She could see it in the way they moved, careful, precise, almost reverent, as if they understood that this small, fragile life deserved protection more than anything else in that moment. The wind whispered through the sparse trees, carrying the dry, dusty smell of the earth, and a soft chill brushed over her arms. She pulled her jacket tighter, not against the cold, but as a protective gesture, as if her very presence could somehow shield the child from the invisible dangers of the world. The child finally lifted her gaze, and the woman noticed how wide and frightened her eyes were. They darted around, taking in the soldiers, the truck, and even the hovering helicopter above. She seemed frozen, unsure if she was allowed to trust that she was safe. The woman spoke softly, her voice gentle, calm, and steady, though she knew the child might not even understand the words. "You're safe now," she said. "No one is going to hurt you. You're not alone." She watched as the child's tiny hands trembled in her lap, the fingers curling into themselves. Slowly, hesitantly, she lifted them toward the woman, as if testing the world to see if it would remain kind. The lead soldier spoke quietly to his team, explaining that the child needed immediate care. There was no time to lose. Even in a place where danger could be everywhere, human compassion demanded swift action. The medics moved closer, checking the child's vital signs, and she allowed herself a small sigh of relief when they nodded to indicate that she was stable. Though weak and frightened, she was alive, and that was all that mattered in that moment. The woman's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back, focusing on the child and the task at hand. As the medics worked, the woman's mind wandered to the days and weeks that had brought her here. She thought of the villages she had visited, the faces of children who smiled despite hunger, the elderly who welcomed even small gestures of kindness, and the families who had clung to hope in the midst of uncertainty. This child was just one among many who had suffered quietly, whose pain had been hidden from the world, yet somehow she had been found. Somehow, help had arrived just in time. The woman felt a surge of gratitude and determination. She would not let this life slip away. The child's small voice finally broke the silence, soft and shaky. I don't want to go back." Her words were barely a whisper, but the weight behind them was clear. The woman's heart ached. She understood without needing explanation. This child had faced unimaginable fear, and now, even though she was physically safe, the shadow of that fear still clung to her. The woman reached forward, placing her hand gently over the child's, letting her feel the warmth of another human being, someone who was present, someone who would not leave. The wind shifted again, rustling the leaves and carrying a sense of quiet urgency. The Apache helicopter above circled more closely, scanning the surrounding terrain for any sign of threat. The convoy remained still, as if the entire world had paused to honor this fragile, extraordinary moment. The woman could feel the connection forming between her and the child, a silent, unspoken bond built on trust, care, and the realization that even in a harsh, uncertain world, someone could still offer protection. The medics prepared to move the child to the truck, ensuring she was comfortable and supported. The soldiers cleared a path, speaking softly to one another, their movements careful, almost reverent. The woman followed closely, staying beside the child as she was gently lifted. Every step felt monumental, as if the small act of walking together across a dusty road carried more weight than the entire day. She could see the child's eyes flicker between the soldiers, the helicopter, and herself. The fear was still there, but so was a faint glimmer of trust. As they settled her into the truck, the woman could feel a mixture of relief and lingering tension. The child shivered slightly, but the warmth of the blanket and the calm presence of the woman seemed to offer some comfort. The medics checked her once more, ensuring she had no immediate injuries or ailments. They spoke softly, asking simple questions and offering reassurance. The child's lips quivered as she tried to respond, her voice barely audible. The woman leaned closer, encouraging her gently, letting her know that it was okay to speak, to feel, and to exist without fear in this moment. The convoy began to move slowly again, the dust rising around the wheels, carrying the faint scent of earth and sweat. The helicopter hovered overhead, its rotors cutting through the still air, a protective presence ensuring that nothing would approach unnoticed. The woman sat beside the child, offering quiet words of comfort and small smiles. She spoke of hope, of safety, and of a future where fear did not control every moment. The child's small hands clutched hers, and in that grip, the woman felt a silent promise. A promise to protect, to care, and to witness the journey ahead. She remembered the faces of the villagers, the long dusty roads, and the quiet mornings where hope seemed distant. This moment was a culmination of those experiences, a reminder that even in a world filled with uncertainty, acts of compassion could shine through the darkness. The child, fragile and trembling, represented that light, a chance to show that humanity, courage, and kindness could prevail even in the harshest conditions. The sun climbed higher, casting sharp shadows across the dusty road. The woman glanced at the child, noting the slight relaxation in her posture. She was beginning to understand that she was safe, that the world could be kind, and that she was not alone. The woman whispered softly, "You're safe now. We are here, and we won't let anything happen to you." The child's eyes flickered with a small, hesitant trust. It was not complete, but it was enough. Enough to know that this moment, though terrifying, had begun to shift toward hope. The convoy moved carefully, each truck and vehicle following the other, creating a sense of order amid uncertainty. The woman could see the surrounding landscape, dry, rugged, and empty in many places, yet beautiful in its own way. The wind carried whispers of the past, of times when fear and danger were constant companions. But today, hope had arrived, fragile and delicate, in the form of a small, trembling child who had been given a chance at life. She realized that every step forward, every careful movement, was part of a journey, not just for survival, but for healing and renewal. The soldiers spoke softly among themselves, their voices a calm presence that reassured both the woman and the child. They were vigilant, attentive, and protective, aware that any sudden change could bring uncertainty back into the fragile moment. Yet the care and discipline in their actions allowed the woman to focus entirely on the child, offering comfort and companionship as they moved forward. She understood that in this quiet way, everyone was contributing to something much larger than themselves, a testament to courage, compassion, and humanity. Hours seemed to stretch in a timeless way as they traveled. The dust, the wind, and the quiet hum of the helicopter above created a cocoon of suspense and protection. The woman continued to speak softly to the child, telling her small stories, describing the world outside the dusty road, and reminding her that she was no longer alone. The child's fingers tightened slightly around hers, and she let out a small, almost inaudible sigh. It was a sound of relief, of tentative trust, and of the first small step toward healing. By the time the convoy reached a safer area, the child's shivering had lessened, and her breathing had become steadier. She looked at the woman with eyes that still held fear, but also a glimmer of curiosity and hope. The woman smiled gently, understanding that the journey was far from over, but that this moment was a victory in itself. It was proof that even in moments of uncertainty and danger, life could be preserved, hope could be restored, and human connection could triumph over fear. The medics finally prepared the child for more thorough care, gently lifting her and ensuring she had everything she needed. The soldiers created a protective perimeter, their movements calm and reassuring. The woman stayed close, holding the child's hand until she was safely cared for. She knew that the events of the day would stay with her forever. The fear, the tension, the raw vulnerability, and now the quiet triumph of compassion and courage. She realized that this moment had taught her something profound, that even in a world where danger could appear without warning, human kindness, bravery, and empathy could shine through. And in that understanding, she felt a quiet determination, a sense that she had been part of something extraordinary, something that would shape her forever and remind her that hope could be found even in the darkest, most uncertain places. The child was now settled on a soft blanket inside the back of the truck, but her small body still trembled with the remnants of fear. Each movement seemed tentative, as though she were testing the world to see if it was safe enough to exist in without flinching. The woman remained by her side, offering quiet words of reassurance. She could feel the child's tiny fingers clutching her own in a fragile grip that carried both desperation and trust. The convoy had slowed, the trucks moving cautiously over the uneven dirt road, while the Apache helicopter hovered above like a vigilant guardian, its rotors cutting through the hot, dry air. The woman's mind raced as she thought about the child's journey to this point. How long had she been alone? How much fear had she endured before someone arrived to help her? Each question pressed on her heart, and she could feel tears threatening to spill, though she held them back. Instead, she focused on the present, on what she could do in this moment to provide comfort, reassurance, and protection. Every gesture mattered. Every soft word, every smile, every careful movement was a lifeline in a world that had so far been unkind to this small, frightened child. The medics checked the child thoroughly, ensuring that she had no injuries that required immediate attention. They spoke in calm, gentle voices, explaining each step of the process even though they knew she might not fully understand. The child's eyes were wide, watching every movement with a mix of curiosity and caution. She flinched when someone moved too quickly, recoiling slightly, but she did not withdraw completely. The woman leaned close, whispering soft words of encouragement and telling her that it was okay to be afraid, that she was safe now, and that she would not be abandoned again. The convoy continued along the dusty road, winding through hills and sparse vegetation. The sun climbed higher in the sky, casting sharp shadows across the land. The woman could see the child's small face reflecting the harsh sunlight, her eyes still wary but slowly beginning to trust. She spoke softly, sharing small stories about the villages they had visited, the people they had helped, and the simple joys of life. The child listened quietly, her lips trembling as if forming words she had longed to say but had been too afraid to speak. The woman encouraged her gently, smiling and nodding, letting her know that it was safe to express herself now. The helicopter above continued to circle, its presence both protective and symbolic of vigilance. Its sensors scanned the surrounding area for any sign of danger, and the soldiers remained alert, their disciplined movements reassuring to both the woman and the child. She could feel the tension in the air, a lingering awareness that the world could still hold surprises, but it was tempered by the growing sense of safety within the convoy. Each careful step, each deliberate movement reinforced the fragile but powerful trust that was forming between the child and the adults around her. As the convoy moved, the woman noticed how the child's hands gradually relaxed, though they still occasionally clenched into fists when a sudden gust of wind stirred the dust around them. She leaned closer, speaking softly about hope, safety, and the possibility of a future where fear did not dominate every moment. She could see the faint flicker of understanding in the child's eyes, a realization that the world was not entirely cruel, that there were people who would protect and care, and that she was no longer alone. The lead soldier spoke quietly to his team, coordinating the convoy and ensuring that they maintained a safe, orderly pace. Each soldier was aware of the gravity of the moment, not just a routine operation, but a delicate and extraordinary act of rescue. They moved with precision, creating a protective space around the child, and the woman could sense the respect and care that radiated from them. Even in the midst of uncertainty, there was a profound awareness that this small life was precious and required both vigilance and empathy. The child's small voice finally broke through the silence. I don't understand, she whispered, her words shaky. The woman leaned closer, her eyes gentle and reassuring. It's okay, she said softly. You are safe now. You are not alone. We are here, and we will protect you. The child's lips quivered as if forming the courage to speak, but she did not yet know the words. The woman's hand rested gently over hers, offering warmth, comfort, and the promise of care. It was a small gesture, but in that moment it carried immense significance. The road ahead was long and dusty, winding through hills and valleys that seemed to stretch endlessly. The woman thought about the challenges that lay ahead, not just in ensuring the child's physical safety, but in helping her regain a sense of trust and hope. Each mile traveled was a step toward healing, a step away from fear and isolation. The convoy's careful, deliberate movements mirrored the slow, patient work of restoring confidence and security to someone who had faced unimaginable uncertainty. The child's breathing grew steadier, though she still flinched at sudden noises or movements. The woman spoke softly, telling her about the simple joys of life, the warmth of the sun, the smell of rain on dry earth, the sound of laughter among friends. She encouraged the child to imagine a world where fear did not dominate every moment, where she could feel safe, cared for, and valued. Slowly, the child's eyes brightened with understanding, and a faint smile tugged at the corners of her lips. It was a small but powerful sign that hope was beginning to take root. The soldiers coordinated with the helicopter crew, ensuring that no unexpected threat could approach the convoy. Their movements were precise, calm, and disciplined, creating a protective cocoon around the child. The woman could feel the weight of responsibility on her own shoulders, but it was tempered by the collective effort of the team. Everyone present understood that this was not merely a routine operation. It was a delicate act of preservation, an affirmation of humanity in the midst of uncertainty. As they reached a safer area, the child began to relax more fully, leaning slightly against the woman. The small gestures, a gentle touch, a soft word, a reassuring smile, all contributed to her growing sense of security. The woman whispered that she was safe, that she would not be abandoned again, and that she was now surrounded by people who cared deeply for her well-being. The child's small nod, barely perceptible, was a signal of trust beginning to form. It was a subtle, quiet acknowledgement that she had survived, that she was cared for, and that she could begin to imagine a future beyond fear. The sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the dusty landscape. The convoy slowed, preparing to settle in a secure location for the night. The woman remained close to the child, speaking softly and reassuringly as they moved. Each step, each gesture, reinforced the fragile trust and hope that had been established. She understood that this moment, delicate, tentative, and full of possibility, was a turning point. It was not the end of the child's journey, but it was a crucial moment in the story of healing and restoration. The helicopter circled above one last time before preparing to return to base, leaving the convoy to continue its careful journey on the ground. The woman felt a quiet sense of relief, mixed with determination. The child was safe for now, but there was more work to be done, more patience, more compassion, and more understanding required to help her truly heal. Yet in this moment, the presence of trust, the small gestures of kindness, and the protective vigilance of the convoy created a sense of hope that was both profound and sustaining. As the convoy settled into the safer area, the woman remained close, helping the child adjust and offering words of encouragement. The child's trembling had lessened, and her eyes, once wide with fear, now reflected a cautious curiosity. The woman understood that the journey ahead would require time, care, and patience. But she also knew that this moment, the first step toward trust, safety, and healing, would remain etched in her memory forever. The wind rustled through the nearby trees, carrying the faint scent of the earth and the distant sounds of life. The woman looked down at the child, smiling softly and whispering that she was safe, valued, and cared for. The child's small hand tightened around hers, and in that simple gesture, the woman felt a powerful affirmation of hope and trust. It was a quiet, yet extraordinary moment, a reminder that even in the face of fear and uncertainty, human kindness and compassion could shine through and create a lasting impact. The convoy set up a secure perimeter, ensuring that the child would remain safe throughout the night. The soldiers moved with quiet efficiency, creating an environment where vigilance and care went hand in hand. The woman remained by the child's side, offering comfort, reassurance, and gentle conversation. She told stories of hope, survival, and the small joys that make life worth living. Slowly, the child began to respond, her lips curving into a small, tentative smile, a reflection of the trust and courage being nurtured in this fragile, extraordinary moment. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm, golden light across the landscape. The woman looked around at the convoy, the helicopter now distant in the fading sky, and the child beside her. She realized that this day, though filled with tension, fear, and uncertainty, had become a profound moment of connection, courage, and compassion. It was a reminder that even in the harshest circumstances, humanity could prevail and hope could take root in the most unexpected places.